As we know, it's been 20 years. 20 years since that fateful day when nearly 3,000 people lost their lives, and all they did was show up to work. All they did was show up to their office. All they did was show up to their precinct. All they did was show up to their firehouse. All they did was show up to the airport. All they did was show up to the Pentagon. And they lost their lives that day. And it is, as we know, a hallowed day in American history. It is a day, yes, marked with mourning and grieving and somberness and sobriety. But it is also a day marked with joy. I remember once a priest who's actually visited here, Father Dennis Robinson. He's the president rector at St. Meinrad Seminary. He once put this kind of thought-provoking question to the seminarians at St. Meinrad. When will the church declare 9/11 a solemnity? When will the church declare 9/11 a solemnity? And as Christians, when we talk about solemnity, right, we think of the Assumption, August 15th. We think of All Saints' Day. We think of Christmas. We think of Easter. We think of these great solemn and high feast days of celebration. And he asked this question, when will the church declare 9/11 a solemnity? That was always a very confusing question for me, because 9/11 is a day marked with sobriety, grief, and mourning that many, many people, nearly 3,000 people, were murdered that day in cold blood. There was a horrific and unthinkable acts of evil that took place that day and have since, acts of terrorism. How could we ever think of that day as a solemnity as we as Christians think of it? And the answer, guys, is obvious. Because there were people who charged into those buildings. There were people who took back Flight 93. There were people who, to their own demise, and for the good of everyone else, sacrificed their lives. They died so that others might, just might, live. And is that not a cause for joy? To know that such people really do exist. And they are ordinary people. People like you and me. You and I, sorry. Ordinary people doing their jobs in extraordinary circumstances. Running into a building, running up flights of stairs, knowing that they probably aren't getting out of this one alive. But maybe someone else will. It really is a cause for joy. And it really is a thought-provoking question. When will the church, even though it can't, but when will the church, right? Still thinking about that. When will the church declare 9/11 a solemnity? And it really highlights some of the themes in our readings this weekend. Specifically, that second reading from James, when he writes kind of what has become a cri de coeur of Catholics and Christians throughout the ages. Faith without works, it's dead. Faith without works is utterly dead. You show me a faith without works, and I will show you the faith that underlies my works, says James. And what is the work of faith? In our gospel today, our Lord reveals that. This kind of necessary component of faith. In our gospel, the Lord asks that basic question, who do people say that I am? Not because our Lord's confused about who he is, but he's looking for faith. And Peter, as we hear in the other Gospels, has had something revealed by him, or to him by God, by the Father in heaven. And Peter responds, you are the Christ. You're not just another prophet. You're not just anyone else. You are the Christ, the Messiah, the Christos, the long-awaited one, the Son of the Father. An answer of faith. And at that, our Lord doesn't pat him on the head and say, well done, Peter, good job. You have faith. He then goes on to predict his passion. Now we get into what is that necessary component, that work of faith, that hallmark of a faith that is alive, which is the cross. He says the Son of Man must suffer greatly and be killed. And only then, on the third day, will he be raised. And not for himself, as we know, but for us, for the other. And that's when he says, listen, if you really have faith, if you really want to come after me, if you really want to follow me, you have to deny yourself. You must pick up your cross. Because whoever saves his life is going to lose it. But whoever loses his or her life for my sake, the Lord's sake, and that of the gospel, will be saved. This is how 9/11 can truly be a solemnity, is because we have seen people. We remember not just those who have died, but those who died running back in. Those who died knowing that they weren't going to get out of this one, but that so someone else might live, so that someone else might have life. It is the cross. And guys, no one is asking you or I to run back into a burning building, to lift up the cross by running back in to a burning building that's about to collapse. But you and I are invited to carry on that joyful project of the cross right here and right now. That we carry the cross, we pick it up because our faith is alive, so that someone else might live. Not you, not me, but that someone else might live. And in what ways are we being invited to this, to lift up the cross? And we have many witnesses in our midst who have lifted it up in this way. We are rounding out 31 days of perpetual adoration. That only happened because there were many parishioners who picked up that cross, whether it was in the middle of the night or the middle of the day, whether it was 1 hour, whether it was 4 hours in a row. They picked up that cross so that the life of Christ could be more alive in our parish is. Did you even step foot in our churches these last 31 days during adoration? Did you at all pick up that cross? Most of you did, and thank you. But if you did not, can you really say that your faith is alive? Because a faith without works, a faith without the cross, without picking it up, it is dead. We have a fall festival coming up. And this is not a fundraiser. Yes, it does raise funds, but it is not intended to be a fundraiser. We didn't move it back here to the campus to fundraise money. We moved it back to the campus so that we can share the joy of Christ with others, that people can be close to Christ here. And many have signed up. Many have for years signed up and made this happen without a hitch. They've lifted the cross, sweated during the day. Have you? Have you picked up that cross so that people in our community can come here and enjoy and come to know a little bit more about the Christians and the life that enlivens us here, the resurrected life of Christ? I mentioned before Mass, we are almost there with our capital campaign, phase 1. And so many of you have sacrificed immensely for that campaign. And it's not about the money. It's about the mission that we are trying to accomplish, the mission that our Lord has set forth before us, and it costs us. It is the cross. And many have sacrificed, many have picked up that cross. Just as generations before us did. And we inherited all of this and never had to lift a finger. Have you lifted that cross to build the brightest beacon of hope in our counties? A faith without works is dead. A faith without the cross is dead. And so I ask you, I encourage you, those who haven't participated in any of these things, who haven't lifted any of the cross, who have not showed your faith that is alive and can become more alive, lift it. Lift the cross. Not because it's going to give you or me any more life, because it might give someone else a life. We're not asking anyone to run into a burning building, but this is our parish. And this is the place where the resurrection is meant to spread like a wildfire that post 3 days of the crucifixion. But it takes us, it takes all of us to lift the cross, that joyful project of living our faith and lifting the cross.